Man in Full, okay? And before we begin talking about Man in Full, I want to talk about the philosophic issue that I think Man in Full addresses, and that is the issue of manliness. It's not a stretch to say that a book entitled A Man in Full is about what it means to be a man and why there might be threats to the idea of being a man. Now, in order to think about that topic, we need to think about what modernity is. The view that I'm going to put forward is that modernity undermines manliness, or modernity displaces manliness. So what is modernity? Modernity is where we live. Modernity is modern liberal democracies based on the idea of equality and human liberty, not based on the idea of inequality. And the goal of modern liberal regimes is to promote peace and prosperity among free and equal citizens. Now, it is not entirely accurate to say that modernity was some conscious project hatched in the minds of some philosophers. Maybe it would have come about were it not for philosophers. But the philosophers of modernity always thought of what they were defending as undermining ancient civilizations. Now, here's what I mean by that. Ancient civilizations are based on the idea of inequality. Inequality among citizens, inequality among people. And the goal of government in ancient societies was not to promote peace and prosperity among free and equal citizens. No, the goal of society in according to ancient thinkers, was to promote virtue, human excellence, to make the best people the best they can be. And what this often meant is that ancient civilizations promoted manliness. Think of just some remnants of this in our language. The word virtue, V-I-R-T-U, virtue, and the word virility start with the same letters and both refer to the same thing, manliness. Now, we need to define what we mean by manliness. As I say, ancient civilizations promoted virtue, human excellence. How did they understand what it is to be a man, or what is manliness? Manliness is taking ownership of an uncertain future, courageously looking in the face of uncertainty and continuing to act. There is a belief that the actions of human beings are somehow notable, worthy of our attention. And that the greatest acts that human beings might endeavor to do may be risky, but they make life worth living. Think Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, Achilles. People who can act in the face of great uncertainty have a kind of warrior mentality. And we don't much like the warrior mentality in modernity. It does, after all, undermine peace and not necessarily cultivate prosperity. So because manliness is connected to, somehow, fighting, or at least in some cases, it's connected to fighting, and modernity is about peace, modern people are very skeptical of manliness. Now, as I say, this new order, this modernity in which we live, looks to conquer manliness, but really what we need to say is something different. What modernity seeks to do is tame manliness, to channel it in ways that we can all benefit and enjoy greater peace and prosperity. Men can be antisocial, but in modernity we try to channel their antisocial tendencies and make them social and civilized. And one of the main ways in which we do that in the modern world is by channeling manliness through commerce. It's a great way to tame people. Someone who used to be a warrior today might be a real estate developer. Instead of conquering Mongolia, they develop Meridian. And all of us benefit from that, with nice homes, jobs for others. We've taken the man, we've channeled his desire for distinction, and now civilized it so we can all benefit. We have football players. The ancient Greeks had Achilles. All of them antisocial, perhaps, but football players are only dangerous to other football players. Achilles was dangerous to everyone. So modern manliness is much more peaceful, much more civilized, as we say. But is that satisfactory to a true man? The tamed manliness that we experience in the modern world. Have we lost something by turning Achilles into a real estate developer? Is he less excellent, less satisfied, less happy than he otherwise would be? So let's put this in a simple proposition so we can all understand what I'm trying to get at here. Liberal democracy, where we live, aims to tame manliness. But if manliness is a feature of human nature, does the strategy of taming manliness suffice, both for the man and for the society? Is suppressing manliness a good strategy? Is channeling it toward commerce something that can work? This, in any event, I think, is the intellectual background of this novel, Tom Wolfe's Man in Full. The place of manliness in liberal democracy is its theme. Now, the question that this novel raises on its own terms, that is the question of the novel, is who is the man in full? Mr. Winkleman, can you throw me the book? Throw me your book for a second. When we look at the book, it's about the man in full. Oh, you've given me the one that is not, I can't remove the cover. But underneath this cover is a picture of who? Charlie Corker. Now this would suggest, would it not to you, that Charlie Corker is the man in full? He's the one on the front cover. But I think it is actually the question of the book, whether that is an accurate interpretation of the book. Because over the course of the book, Charlie seems to be displaced by another man, Conrad Hensley. Or to be more precise, over the course of the novel, Conrad educates Charlie into a new version of manliness. Not a particularly modern version of manliness, not an American version of manliness, but perhaps a full version of manliness, the true one. Now, I think I would defend the following proposition about the book, in fact. Charlie Corker represents American manhood. Or maybe I should say modern American manhood. While Conrad, and I think this will become rather obvious over the course of reading the book, represents Stoic manliness. An ancient, more philosophical variety of manhood. And Charlie becomes convinced by the end of the book that Conrad's stoical variety of manliness is superior. No one else does, but Charlie does. Mr. Brady.
So when you say Stoic, you mean in the Greek sense? That's
yes.
Stoics.
Yeah, we'll see this as we read the book, that Conrad will read the writings of Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, while he's in prison, and find that this book explains himself to himself. And then Conrad will meet Charlie, and through the writings of Epictetus, convince Charlie of the same truth. I don't think, like, what I just said there is not controversial. It's not a subtle reading of the book. That this book hits you over the head with a 2x4 with what I just said, okay? So ultimately what I think Wolfe is getting at is America's understanding of manliness is inadequate and requires something from outside of America, and in fact something from outside of modernity, to be properly understood. This very modern novel, there's a lot of cuss words, there's a lot of in-depth descriptions of human parts. It's very much a page-turner, not a lot of long words. This very modern novel is a critique of modernity. Okay, so what I was hoping we could do today, and I want to invite your help in this, is begin with this character, very important character, central character of the book, Charlie Corker, and ascertain what makes him so manly. What are the elements of his character, what are the things he does that make us think that he could be a great man? So I invite this, go ahead.
Even if it's an irrational or somewhat detrimental outcome, he's still willing to make that choice when nobody else is. He's willing to act without thinking of the consequences.
So what are you talking about there, for instance, in the book?
When he takes the snake, when everybody is about 20, 50 feet behind him, he knows he has to do it, and he walks over, steps over the snake, grabs him by the jaw, holds him there, and then throws him in the bag, knowing he could be bit at any time, not even thinking of that, though.
All right, that's a great scene, right? I mean, that was actually the scene that when I read the book captivated me the most. Like, oh, this is a serious book. He just grabbed a snake with his bare hands and carried it. Right? That's what a man would do. I wouldn't do that. I would think a man would shoot it with a pistol or something, but not this guy. What other episodes that we look at in the book, Mr. Winkleman?
I wonder if he would have done that if he hadn't had the party there, the hunting party with, Mr. Armholster and those people. But it was kind of, I thought he was kind of posturing a little bit there.
That's not unimportant though, right? He's a performer of some sort. Mr. Proctor?
From a physical standpoint, Tom Wolfe calls him the bull of a man. He's a former football player, big back, big guy.
All right, so that's a big category. These are like pieces of evidence that we can use, right? A big category for him about why he might be a man is he is athletically built. Right? No one ever looks at a midget and says, "Now there's a man." No, I mean, he's a human being, don't get me wrong. And that's not my point. I mean, there's debates about this. I'm on the side that they are human. The athletic prowess of him is seen in his physical stature and also in his past, right? He's a football star. He's the 60-minute man. Right? Not Morley Safer. This guy is the 60-minute man. Played both sides of the ball, and the last player did this. Big fella, right? Scored the last 2 touchdowns in a game that Georgia Tech came back against Georgia. Big deal. Right, can we see that? I mean, wouldn't we think this is at least part of it? A man, he's built, he knows how to use it. He seems to be in that category. So, and only someone like that could grab the snake too. It took some courage, but he did that too. All right, go ahead, Miss Conrad.
I don't know if this is true, because I'm not a guy, but
Thanks for clarifying that.
no, I'm just, but I feel like he's like a man's man, kind of like, gets the younger girls, because he's in his 60s, right? But he gets like these younger girls, or he gets younger girls to like lean into him, or he's married to a girl in her 20s, so maybe he's, he has, and then the other guys kind of are amazed by that, like, whoa, look, he can get those girls, or whatever.
Okay, so this seems to be an important part of manliness. Let's be right up front about it. Later on in the book, there's going to be a scene in the horse breeding barn that is fantastic. And this seems to be a part of manliness, right? I mean, not only attractive, but able to reproduce. And he is able to reproduce even into his 60s with a hot little number Serena, right? He dumps the old wife, gets a new wife, showing that he's still got it. Right? What's the it? Manliness. Virility, right? And so this has got to be part of it. I mean, whether this is central to it or absolutely crucial to it is another question. But that's got to be part of what it takes to be a man, what it means. What else do we have here in Charlotte? Miss Cooper. Miss Cooper.
He seems really happy with his land, like wealth, money. He talks, like, I know he goes on and on and on about how he has the plantations and he's really happy about it because it shows he's made it. Well, yeah.
So he's kind of he's well off, right? Big time developer.
Always picks up the check, all that sort of
Picks
thing.
up the check. He's, willing to own the uncertain future. Right? And he's got the means to do it, everyone thinks. That's important. Has a big plantation. Has a bunch of servants there to help. People look at him and go, there's a successful man. Hey, have you ever met anyone like this? Someone who's well off, got it all together? They can be kind of impressive. And that's what Charlie Corker seems to be, right? Fame, fortune. What else can we say? What other attributes might he have? Go ahead, Mr.
Cheney.
Mr. Cheney.
Well, he's always aware of what he's projecting. He has that rule where he doesn't explain himself to subordinates or women in his terms. And he's also goes to great pains to hide the problem with his knee as long as he can. So he always is aware of how he's projecting invincibility almost.
All right, so let's put that under this category, right? He's prominent socially. He's concerned about the way he looks. He always looks good. He puts the best foot forward. Plantation, nice cars, flies places, even when it's not necessary. All this shows that he can do it. He's well respected in the community, right? He has been ever since 1960. Think about it. He dumped his wife, married a 28-year-old or whatever she is, and has he been ostracized? No. The wife has been forgotten. Right? In fact, we're going to see Martha later on. She's invisible without Charlie. She lived in the glow of Charlie, or in the radiance of Charlie. So this is a good list, right? I mean, we could give parts of what we have seen in the early parts of the book, a little piece of evidence to support each of these conclusions. But this seems to be an important part of modern American manliness. Mr. Winkleman.
I think, and this may be an extension of his athleticism on the field, which he certainly did in that arena, but he's very adept at imposing his will, charming others, and you don't charm on the football field, but imposing your will is a big part of it.
Yeah, but that's been a key to his financial success, right? He's been a salesman.
To everything.
Yeah, he's been a salesman. And later on, when Ray Peepgas talks about him, that ends up being central to why he's such a man. That he's got that magnetism that can get people to do what he wants, which is what a salesman does. And so that almost like summarizes several of these aspects. Go ahead, Mr. Rhodes.
What kind of really makes it American is like the burglar alarm incident where he's like, I'm from Baker County, I can protect my own stuff. Like that kind of American self-defense, this is my house, like this is my castle or whatever.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. That's got to be in athletic, you know, it falls under one of these categories. Now, what is this is another, what I'm trying to say is that in modern American views of manliness, these are the parts. You're a good athlete. You can reproduce, or at least you could if you wanted. You're successful financially and you're prominent. Right now, how is Charlie Corker doing on this score as the book begins? Is he powerful? Let's talk about this.
Yeah, well, number 3 is starting.
Let's start with number 1.
Okay.
Is he powerful athletically?
Yes.
Well, he's got the knee thing, but
He's breaking down. Right, his knee kills him. He tries to hide the limp. He's 60. Right? Now, he's still more powerful than most 60-year-olds, but he knows that 60 leads to 61, and which eventually, and I'm going to skip the other numbers, leads to 70. Right? And that leads to 80. Is he what he once was? No. So he's on the decline athletically. Though he can, as we say, still grab a snake. How is he doing sexually?
Not very well.
yeah.
All right, explain to me what you mean by not very well.
He
Can't
has
he
to
get-
talk himself into sometimes when he sees Serena, even though he knows she's beautiful, and that's why he took her on. He doesn't see her as attractive anymore because he's finding that he's slipping into maturity. When he starts seeing himself as more mature, thinking about his wife again, who's not attractive, starts to doubt himself as a man, saying, I'm not man enough, so he has to trick himself into believing this is what makes
Well,
him
he certainly has
correct.
doubts about whether he did the right thing with his first wife.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When they were on the hunting trip, she was like off with the other girl the whole time, and even when he like shot all the male whales or whatever, she like wasn't impressed, so he like doubts himself.
Yeah, there's certainly a distance, as part of the distance between Charlie and the new wife, Serena. I think Martha might have appreciated what he did hunting, but Serena isn't impressed. Can he still reproduce?
Yes.
What is the evidence? So, what is he worried about right now? What's that?
There's a baby.
There is a baby. Is he worried about being able to reproduce right now?
He's worried about impotence, and that scene in the closet where he's back there reading the book, and she comes in and she's looking really good, and he just, I don't remember how Wolfe says it, that he's waiting for the tingle that never came. And,
Yes.
And said something about it's been 3 weeks, which I would think with her, 3 hours might be a long time.
Sounds good. Yes. So he's very worried about being impotent. And over the course of the novel, these worries will be completely justified. So he's not what he once was in several respects. He's no longer the 60-minute man or the 60-second man. It seems when it comes to reproducing, or at least he's very worried about this. So worried that he won't try. Which it seems like that's Serena's purpose in his life. Financial success? Is he Mr. Sane, or how's he doing?
He owes a lot of money. What is it? 80.
He's in debt up to his eyeballs.
To use one of Kinney's phrases, crash and burn.
That's going to be a phrase later on in the book, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's never going to get out of debt. Why is that? Why has he gotten into such debt? Good, Ms. Cooper?
For his tower.
All right, what is the name of the tower?
Corker?
Corker Concourse? So he built a monument to himself and made it to be a beautiful, very expensive place. Probably cost more than $100 per square foot. Right? Nothing but the best in Corker Concourse. But it has put him in such debt that he will never get out. What was going on at the same time that he built Corker Concourse? Yes, Ms. Cooper.
Atlanta was expanding into suburbs, and so he thought Corker Concourse would be the next big suburb, but it was too far out. Because other real estate developers had made towers, and then the towers became the names of the town.
So it was bad timing. Personally, what was going on in his life? Yes.
That was when he struck up his affair with Serena.
So at the same time he was showing his manliness sexually, he was building a tower as a monument to himself financially. And his ruin is kind of baked in that cake. That is, his ruin is a result of both these things. He's unhappy and ruined financially. But at least he showed he still had it. Right? You can see how he's going to end up with problems. And socially, is he still prominent socially? Yes, he's still a big man. They still want him, you'll see later on, to come to the opening of art exhibits. He still can have people out at his plantation to hunt quail, and they're happy to do it. But he recognizes over the course of the novel that his social prominence is tied to his continuing financial success. And that if he loses everything money-wise, he's not going to be able to hang out with the same crowd. He will be bankrupt Charlie Corker and not invited. So, his social prominence could be compromised greatly over the course of bankruptcy proceedings that seem to be looming for him. So what Wolfe has given us here in the character of Charlie Corker is, as I believe, a portrait of American manliness. And we have seen a man in crisis on each of the planks. Just think about the trajectory of the first 3 chapters. Okay, the first chapter, we see Charlie shooting quail at Turpentine. Then we see him get worked over at the bank. And he walks out with the saddlebags. recognizing that he could lose everything. He flies back to the plantation. They discuss options, financial options, whether to lay people off, whether to sell and liquidate parts of the business. Then he sees a snake, grabs it with his bare hands, and takes it to the snake house. In the last lines of that chapter, Charlie Corker felt almost whole again. Page 89. So this, the primal aspect, is what he emphasizes. The primal aspect of being a man almost makes him feel like a complete human being again at the end of even all of that. Now there are other characters, and all of them, I think we have to put them on a manliness scale. And let's think about several of these characters as we go through them. The ones that hang out with Charlie are the ones, or the ones who have business relations with Charlie are the ones we need to take a look at. These are the main characters who will be dealing with Charlie. And let's start with one of the great names, Raymond Peepgas. There's never been a manly man named Raymond Peepgas. Ray Peepgas, right? He admires Charlie Corker. But he is not man enough to pull off all the things that Charlie does. In other words, I mean, think about what all that means. What that means is this character, Ray Peepgas, adheres to the American idea of manliness, but he's not as good at it as Charlie. He could have been a good athlete, but never pursued it. Does he have virility, Ray Peepgas? Yeah, but what has it done for him? Moved him up or moved him down?
Very far down.
It's moved him down. It's sunk him into a great hole. Right? Has he achieved financial success? Only in a moderate way, right? He's not the risk taker that Charlie Corker is. He's willing to take the job in the department where there's never layoffs, but there's low wages. He's the kind of guy who'd want tenure. I'll have to erase that then. And he's not prominent socially, right? I mean, he's living in apartment buildings on the outskirts of a nice part of town. Ray Peepgas is a nobody. He's going to try to become a somebody over the course of this novel. And it'll be important to figure out why, or what he does, and how he models himself in order to become a somebody. But I just want to emphasize this. He is not just a cowardly version of Charlie Corker. He's also an incompetent one. But the important part is that he is a cowardly version of Charlie Corker. He would never grab the snake. He would never take the risk. He has to fly to a different country to find a mistress. And his wife, I think, seems to dominate him until he is exited, or is shown the exit from that marriage, which is relatively quick. Now there's someone else, so let's go to another character on this scale that Charlie hangs out with, and here I'd like to solicit your responses. Charlie's underling, Wismore Stroke. How does he strike you? Go ahead, Mr. Graff.
Numbers guy.
All right, he is the numbers guy.
Charlie always looks to him for what the next move is. He doesn't really take his opinion into account, but he just has him there. He's sort of like backup for what he plans to do. Like when he plans to lay off 15%, even though Wiz says it's probably not a good idea, he still wants to. So Wiz is just a number guy. But he's very quiet, very content. He doesn't get angry or upset. He's just kind of stuck, like this plain.
Okay, good. Mr. Cheney?
He is the anti-Charlie. almost in every mannerism way. He's as calculated as Charlie is daring. He's as feeble physically, the way they describe him, as Charlie is, bull strong. Just almost the polar opposite in every way.
Well, what is his goal out of life? Wismer Struck.
To live forever.
To live forever. Does he want? If your goal is to live forever, what is your attitude toward a risk? You don't want to risk. He runs just enough, right? To me, he runs the ideal amount for his weight and age, right?
And drinks fizzy water.
He drinks fizzy water, not whiskey. He no doubt eats tofu instead of steak, right? And when you say he's the anti-Charlie, it's almost like he's asexual, right? I mean, Ray Peepgas, and here's what I mean by that. Does he reproduce? Does he seem interested in reproducing? He's a numbers guy, as Mr. Graff said, right? And seems to be moved very much by the numbers. Right? He may be in good shape, he does run, but it's about living forever. The anti-Charlie Corker. Whereas Ray Peepgas accepts Charlie's understanding of manliness and just isn't as good as that. Wismer Struck rejects the idea. He's the modern man. No risk, peace, prosperity, numbers guy based on science, won't take a risk himself, carefully calculates and tries to control the future. Now the whiz here, Mr. Struck, makes an observation about Charlie that I want us to take a look at. And it's on page 74 and 75. Of course, I don't have it underlined. And there may be different page numbering, so I'm gonna recall what he says, all right? And here's what he has to say. He says, the salesmanship that Charlie has engaged in is crucial. In fact, it exudes what being a man is for Charlie and for modern Americans. There's a great risk involved in salesmanship, right? You're putting yourself out on a limb, but you're trying to get someone to do what you want them to do. I think Mr. Winkleman put it, in football you try to impose your will on the others. In salesmanship too. But the difference is this, and it's crucial. In salesmanship, you impose your will on someone and get them to like it. Get them to consent to it. Get them to say yes. That's modern manliness. Right? Achilles slaughters. Charlie Corker, at least in the ideal circumstance, arranges things so you want to do what he wants you to do. An ideal circumstance. And Wismer seems to understand this. Is Wismer a salesman? No. He's a numbers guy. The soul of an accountant. Okay, there's other characters we need to take a look at who are not yet integrated in this part of the story with Charlie Corker, and that's the mayor and Roger. Mayor Jordan. Now we don't know as much about Mayor Jordan as we do about Charlie Corker. We see him only in the mayor's office, but we can figure some things out about his character from his conversations with Roger Two-White. What kind of a man is Mayor Jordan? Go ahead, Miss Cooper.
He's a man that's going to say what he needs to say to get elected. Politician.
All right, so he's a politician, and that's true. He watches what he says. And this comes up in the discussion over whether he's going to call people blacks or African Americans. And he adopts the new lingo at that time, African American instead of black, to show that he's up with the way current people are talking in Atlanta. It's very important to be that, and he is that. Is he only that?
I'd say no. I term it down to he's just got it figured out. He knows how to play into everybody's hands when he actually has his own motivations about what his intentions are. It seems that they're pure, like he's that politician, but sometimes you got to play that game, and he knows how to play it. And it seems, I just lost my train of thought.
Well, he's very much into the Atlanta way, right? The Atlanta way. What is the Atlanta way? The Atlanta way is we're going to get the whites and the blacks and work together, right? The blacks have the votes. The whites have the power. We're going to make sure we keep peace. Right? And there is this great dilemma that he faces. Okay, I want you to think about this when you think about Mayor Jordan just being a politician. Okay? Because I think he's more than that. The dilemma that he's going to face is this. He's got an election campaign coming up. A black football player from Atlanta has been accused by a white member of the establishment of raping his daughter. Right? The white guy, who's a friend of Charlie's, will not bring charges yet against the black football player. But there's a whispering campaign that is afoot, and the daughter has been identified as the victim in this particular case. If the mayor was simply someone looking for votes, what would he do? He would come out and say, this young man has been wrongly accused. And he would easily win the election because his competition is a black demagogue who is stirring up racial animosity. But he will not, we will see, the mayor will not do that. He wants to make sure the young man gets a fair trial, but he will not come out and defend him. He will defend his right to a fair trial, which is not the same thing as defending him, strictly speaking. In other words, the mayor is interested in the public good, right? The young man and his accuser should get a fair hearing. And while I don't mean to say anything controversial, I will say this. This is not what Jesse Jackson would do. Right? This guy is not, Mayor Jordan is not seeking to stir up racial animosity. He is seeking to heal wounds while adhering to the law. Now, he no doubt has an interest in doing this. The white establishment and the black population both need to be satisfied, but what can satisfy both? Answer, the law can satisfy both. It's there beforehand, and it's his job as mayor to defend it, and he's going to do it. We'll see later on that his opponent is running a campaign which very much sees this as selling out. But he keeps doing it. Now, what is a man to do? Is he to go with public opinion? Or is he to seek to do the right thing? And I think the mayor is genuinely committed to an understanding of manliness that forgoes short-term benefits involving racial demagoguery and embracing long-term principles which are tough to defend in a democracy. That is, he's a genuinely long-sighted statesman in this book. And the book ends in a very unsatisfactory way. I mean, Tom Wolfe has said that to himself. There's an epilogue at the end. And the epilogue has the mayor and Roger Two-White talking. So these guys are more important than the early part of this book lets on. They're the ones who tell us the resolution of the story. Okay? So I think there's a kind of manliness involved in serving the public that the mayor here represents. Serving the public's long-term instead of short-sighted interests. What kind of a man is Roger Too White? Roger White II. Sorry, but he's called Roger Too White. What does that mean? What kind of a man is he? Mr. Winkleman.
You know, when the book opens up, the first impression I had of him was, and they used the term in the book, but I knew it before I saw it in Oriole. I mean, I made a note to myself, he likes Stravinsky. I mean, he doesn't like hip hop. He listens to Stravinsky and classical music and whatnot. That doesn't necessarily mean he's a sellout, but in terms of you know, catering to the hood or whatever, that's, you can't really go.
Well, he is called Roger Too White,
Yeah.
right? It's a great name, right? Who is his favorite black thinker?
Booker T. Washington.
Booker T. Washington. Where does he fall on the scale? I mean, is he like Malcolm X?
No.
No. He's like the opposite of Malcolm X, right? If the blacks population just sit here and works hard, we don't have to depend on the white guy. Let's just take care of ourselves and to the extent that we can.
Wasn't the same to balance themselves economically before they try to go socially?
Exactly. Before you try to conduct any kind of revolution, take care of educating yourselves and gaining enough resources to live. And which is not blaming anyone. It's taking care of business at home. So could he run for office with those views in Atlanta? No, he's too white. Right? That's the point. He's the friend of the mayor. He works in one of the high law firms. He drives through Atlanta on the way to on the way to go visit the football coach. He sees Freaknik, this spontaneous, this planned spontaneous dance festival in downtown Atlanta, and can't believe people are wasting their time with that garbage. Right? He's too white. But he's resisted a lot of things. I mean, he does go to the symphony. That's very interesting, isn't it? He goes to the symphony can't name a rap singer. LL Cool J is a rap singer. I understand he's the Larry Bird of rap singers, is the way it's been put to me. He doesn't listen to LL Cool J. He listens to Igor Stravinsky. Right, which is interesting. Okay, now the other character we need to talk about, so I guess we should just say this. Roger resists public opinion more than the mayor. Right, he has carved out some sort of high-class vision of the good life that involves taking in the best that Western civilization has to offer. The best music, the best books, not the popular stuff. We'll learn later on he reads Nietzsche, which if it's not the best, ain't nothing. Now, we have one other character that were introduced after chapter 4 that we need to get a grip on, okay? And that character is crucial, I mean, as crucial as anything for understanding this book. And that character is Conrad Hensley. I will argue over the course of our lectures that Conrad Hensley is the man in full. What do we know about Conrad? Is he athletic? Yes.
Quasi-athletic.
What do you mean by that?
He's projected as having a lot of physical abilities. He may not look opposing, but he's physically capable of handling a very highly manual labor job in the freezer unit.
Yeah.
So it's not really the kind of thing that you see people cheering for, but he has that physical ability to go out and match his abilities with anybody else.
And we'll learn later on that he has massive forearms, which he gained in the suicide freezer.
Which is interesting because they talk about how the interview with Charlie, that he's like, workout regime. If I need to work out, I just go chop some wood, something along those lines. It's essentially just the same way. It's built the same way, but of course the size is domineering.
Yeah. Is Conrad virile?
Never even thought of cheating on his wife.
Yeah, I mean, he has children, but he's not a womanizer.
Yes, all right. So but he has had kids, and they have shaped having the having of the kids has shaped his destiny. Right? He had planned on going to college and getting a good, and getting an education, but because he slept with his wife, with Jill, he ends up impregnating her and marrying her and having another child, and his education will never be complete, it seems. So it hasn't it's been kind of a detriment to him in a way. It's gotten him in trouble, kind of like it gets Ray in trouble, except he's responsible and Ray's not. We're going to have to sort these things out. Financial success. He's saving up for a condo in Oakland or something? I don't know.
Dansville.
What's that?
Dansville.
Dansville, is that a real place?
Yeah.
All right. Nice
It
place?
is really beautiful there.
He's got a dream. To have a condo in Dansville. He needs a down payment, so he's working in the suicide freezer unit. Is he socially prominent? He lives next to, a Vietnamese family whose mother doesn't want the daughter to go out dressed the way she is and keeps calling her Lia Sla, right? Lia Sla, which I think is Vietnamese for little slut. I always wanted to say that. Now, Conrad shows up for work one day, right? He shows up for work one day, and he's not feeling like going to work, and he says to himself, no, be a man. It's page 111. Be a man. What does he mean by man in that circumstance? What does Conrad mean by being a man?
He has responsibility, whether he likes it or not. And he's not looking for that quick fix ever. Even though he wants it, he'll have moments, but he's like, no, we need to get here because I have 2 children and a wife that I want to put in a better place. So he's taking himself out of his own and looking out for other people.
Do your duty. Do what is part of your long-term plan that you have made. Be responsible. Excellent. Right? So he goes into the suicide freezer and spends the night working there. Right? All because he sees that as part of a bigger picture in his life. Now, what is his background? How did he come to this idea of being a man? Well, let me venture on this ground for just a second. His parents were hippies, right? Slept around, moved from town to town. They were itinerant, and he came to know that what they were doing was the opposite of what a good human being would do. And since they were rejecting conventional life in America by being hippies and having open sexual relationships with people and not owning property and not having jobs, he decided that he was going to do the opposite. Whatever they're doing, the negative absolute value of that thing is good. And this is his idea of what it means to be a man. It ends up coming, if you think about it, from American morality. He gets it by way of rejecting his parents' rejection of American morality. Get someone pregnant? No, marry her. I can live off other people? No, get a job. The day he's laid off, he goes and seeks another job. Right? Pursue education? No, not at the expense of the responsibilities that I have undertaken. Right? He is a responsible man. Now, Why is he a responsible man? As far as he knows, at this point in his life, he's a responsible man only because his parents were irresponsible. Right? He doesn't know why he is the way he is. And this is what he needs to learn over the course of the novel if he is going to be a man in full. He has good instincts, but they are shallow because they're only dependent on his rejection of his parents. Right? He's an interesting guy, right? Usually the people who reject their parents end up as the hippies. But he is the guy who rejects his parents and ends up straight-laced. Is that what the opposite of hippie is? He ends up straight-laced. He ends up like, he's like kind of me. What does Conrad do that is admirable? Does he do anything over the course of these? Go ahead, Mr. Winkleman.
Well, in the freezer unit, he saves his friend from being run over by that hand truck.
And that's a big deal, right? I mean, so he performs one of the great, I mean, this is the equivalent of Charlie taking the snake. Charlie grabs the snake, uses great physical power, at some risk to himself, and throws in the snake. He grabs it, carries it over, despite his bad knee, takes it into the snake house. What Conrad does is almost as remarkable. He saves a fellow human being who's about to get run over by a hand truck or a forklift in the freezer unit by one of these amateurs who've come into the freezer unit and have slid, kind of like people driving in Boise today. Right? Slid and about to run this guy over, and he jumps kind of through the forks, it seems, and pushes the guy out of the way, and he doesn't get run over by the forklift. And the guy knows it, right? I mean, and the guy isn't like who he hangs out with. It's the hippie of the suicide unit, the hard rocker, the East Bay white trash is who he saves. But he saves him. And this is admirable. And what does he get as recompense for saving this guy? Laid off. So the plan that he has for himself ends up being upset. And it will be up to the rest of the action of the novel for him to fix it, and as he is fixing it, come to understand himself. So what we've tried to do here so far today is lay out these main characters. And we haven't talked about the lady characters all that much, and I would justify that by saying this book is about a man in full. That is, it's the focus of this book is on who represents genuine human virtue, genuine human excellence. And while everyone in Atlanta, if they took a vote on who represents genuine human excellence, would say it's Charlie Corker. I say that with great confidence because people imitate him, but they can't duplicate the way he is. But as we're going to see, he is in crisis. And what the crisis is a crisis of American understanding of manliness. The vote is wrong. And Charlie goes on the way down as he confronts a series of crises. Conrad comes to understand himself. And we'll see that he has the solution to the problems that Charlie faces. Does anyone have any questions about any of this? I see that we're almost out of time, so we have discussion sections then on Tuesday. And we'll be back in here next Thursday, I believe. So if you have any issues with anything, let me know. Get going on the wikis, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you. All right.